as many anticipated. The shock and the grief we saw in the immediate aftermath of Tuesday's tragedy is now giving way to anger. Anger at the Lebanese leadership for the negligence that led to the explosion, but also the corruption that has long riddled Lebanon's institutions, meaning that basic utilities like electricity and waste disposal have, in recent years, been sporadically functional at best. Well, France 24's Leila Molana-Allen joins us now from Beirut. Leila, President Macron is walking a bit of a diplomatic tightrope here, isn't he? Because he's got some pretty tough messages for his hosts, namely the Lebanese president and prime minister.
He has got a tough decision to make, and he's trying, as you say, to walk that line very carefully at the moment. But he took a tough line today when he came here. Of course, we've seen over the last few months the French government being very tough on the Lebanese government here, saying we will not give you another financial bailout unless you implement some of the reforms that we're looking for. But of course, the situation now is different. This is now disaster relief. And immediately when this happened, like many other countries around the world, the French government saying, of course, we are sending disaster relief as quickly as we can. And you mentioned some of the things there that they've sent in. A plane actually flew behind President Macron, bringing in another relief and medical team. But what he was seeing when he came on the streets here, he walked around these streets just behind me in Jamaiza, some of the worst damaged parts of Beirut, and people mobbed him. People shouting, the people want the downfall of the regime, shouting Michel Aoun, the president who Macron had just met with, Michel Aoun must go. He's a terrorist, he's a criminal. People begging Emmanuel Macron. One woman shouted at him, don't give them any money, don't give those criminals our money. And he said, when she said, we don't trust them, he said, I know, back to her. Now, he's clearly aware of the mood on the streets of Beirut. Many people here haven't trusted their government for a very long time and now feel their government is responsible for so many deaths and injuries. And people out on the street here today, there were signs as well saying he mustn't give any money to the government. Now, some countries are trying to walk a line in between. For instance, the Canadians have pledged $5 million, but they've said at least 1.5 million of that immediately has been earmarked to go to local partners like the Lebanese Red Cross, who run all the volunteer ambulances here, and it's going to go directly to them. They will not be sending money to the government. And Macron himself today said, you won't get a penny from us, to politicians that he met with, unless you do implement reforms and unless we know exactly where that money is going. So everyone very aware of the difficulty of negotiating around. People here so angry who believe that if that aid money comes in and it's directed towards the government, it will not go where it's needed and much of it might be pocketed. Of course, people here believe the politicians very corrupt.
Yes, it very much sounds like, the grief and the shock that we talked about in the immediate aftermath. Also, yesterday is really giving way to anger now. And are we seeing any signs of protest? That protest movement that was so active in the latter part of last year and in various sporadic points during the course of this year as well. Are we seeing any resurgence of that, people taking to the streets?
There is palpable rage on the streets, people in disbelief and yet belief, because many people saying, what more could we expect from a government that we don't trust and we've never believed in? And people are taking to the streets, but they're not taking to the streets to protest right now. That's not what today is about. The mood today, very different. The mood today is one of action. People taking to the streets with brooms and shovels, crowds of people marching down the streets all around this area, coming together the community to sweep up the streets, to hand out water and food and medical supplies to people who need it, local volunteer organisations getting involved. I spoke to two young women, two students. I said to them, why are you here? They said, we're Lebanese. Where else would we be? Our people need us. And we know the government isn't doing anything. I said, where are the authorities? They said, why would we expect them to be here? They don't do anything else for us. We're the only people who can help each other. And once again, they're leaving us to it. We wouldn't expect any better. And many people also here trying to retrieve what they can from these destroyed buildings. There is a very real threat right now of some of these buildings, many of them the remnants of the Civil War. This is one of the areas that still has old buildings in it, and many of those now about to crumble. This building that you can see on my left, the reason you can't see too many people behind me, some still running around and trying to save goods from the restaurants and cafes around here, but it's been cleared by the civil defence because there is a very real threat that imminently this building could collapse. Many buildings like it, you can see just how decrepit it is. Balconies falling off, bricks crumbling, as I say, a very old building that already was in disrepair and has been for years. many buildings along these streets where people are working, imminent risk of that happening. And of course, that means we could face many more injuries from secondary collapses. Many people who are trying to go back into their homes too, unsure about the structural stability. We've been speaking to some engineers who are trying to work on how to support the buildings, if scaffolding or something might work. But the level of the shock, of course, we know that it was similar to an earthquake, so there could be a lot of internal damage, particularly inside a lot of the concrete buildings here. When concrete shifts, there can be internal cracks that you don't necessarily see on the outside, and suddenly they can go like that. So a very real threat as people try and clear up as much as they can and bring what they can of the city back to life, while knowing that they may yet see a lot more damage to come.
Yeah, indeed. The immediate aftermath of an earthquake is quite often more dangerous than the earthquake itself. As you say, buildings at risk of collapse there in Beirut. Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed. Leila Molana-Allen in the heart of the Lebanese capital. Well, as we've been saying,